The will was read in a room that smelled of old leather and betrayal, and I felt the ground shift beneath me as the executor's voice droned on, stripping me of what was rightfully mine. My father's estate, decades of his sweat, love, and sacrifice, was being handed to my stepbrother, Ethan, a man who'd never lifted a finger for anyone but himself. By the time the meeting ended, I was trembling, not with grief, but with a rage so fierce it could have burned the room to ash. I'm Emily Harper, 30 years old, and I'd spent my life proving I was more than the troubled kid label my stepmother pinned on me when she married my dad. He was my rock, the one who believed in me when I was failing high school, the one who paid for my art classes when I found my calling in painting. His death 6 months ago from a sudden heart attack left a hole in my world, but I never imagined it would also steal my future. The estate, his house, his savings, the cabin by Lake Tahoe where we'd spent summers sketching together, was supposed to be split evenly between me and Ethan. That's what Dad promised. But the executor, Mr. Raymond Caldwell, a wiry man with a smile too slick for trust, read a revised will that left me with nothing but a single painting and a letter in Dad's handwriting. Ethan sat across the mahogany table, his smug grin cutting deeper than any knife. At 35, he was all charm and no substance, tall, with the kind of polished good looks that made people trust him too easily. He'd moved into our family when I was 10, after his mother married my dad, and from day one, he treated me like an obstacle to his ambitions. "It's what Dad wanted," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy as he adjusted his tie. "You know he always worried you'd squander it." I wanted to scream that Dad would never do this, that he knew I'd turn my life around, that my art gallery was finally breaking even. But the room was suffocating, and Caldwell's eyes darted nervously to Ethan, as if they shared a secret I wasn't meant to know. The letter in my hand felt like my only lifeline. I clutched it, unopened, as I stormed out of the lawyer's office, the weight of their betrayal pressing against my chest. Back at my small apartment, I sat on the floor, surrounded by half-finished canvases, and tore open the letter. Dad's familiar scrawl brought tears to my eyes. "Emily, my heart, you're stronger than you know. If things go wrong, trust your instincts. Look closer." It was vague, maddeningly so, but it was enough to spark a fire in me. Dad didn't write empty words. This was a clue, a call to fight. I didn't know how, but I was going to uncover what Ethan and Caldwell had done. The next morning, I drove to Dad's house, now Ethan's, according to the will. The sprawling Victorian, with its wraparound porch and ivy-covered walls, felt like a stranger's now. Ethan was already there, directing movers to box up Dad's things. "You shouldn't be here," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "This is my property now." "Your property?" I spat. "You didn't care about Dad. You barely visited him these last years." He shrugged, his eyes cold. "He made his choice. You need to move on." But I couldn't. Not when every memory of Dad was tied to this place. Not when I knew in my bones that something was wrong. I started digging, quietly at first. I called old family friends, Dad's accountant, anyone who might know about a revised will. No one had heard of it. Dad's lawyer, a woman who'd known him for 20 years, was on maternity leave during the reading, and Caldwell had been her replacement. Convenient. Then I found it. A small, overlooked detail in Dad's bank records, which I'd accessed through his old online portal. A $50,000 transfer to an account linked to Caldwell, made 2 weeks before Dad's death. My heart raced. A bribe? It was too neat, too suspicious. But I needed proof, something undeniable, or I'd just be the hysterical daughter making baseless claims. I didn't know it then, but Ethan's own arrogance would be his undoing. He'd always been sloppy, too confident in his charm, and I was about to learn just how far he'd gone to steal what was mine. I spent the next week obsessing over that $50,000 transfer, my apartment now a war room of scattered papers and coffee mugs. The bank records were a start, but they weren't enough. Courts needed hard evidence, not hunches. I needed to know what Caldwell and Ethan were hiding, and I needed it fast before Ethan sold off Dad's house and vanished with the money. I started tailing Caldwell. He worked out of a sleek office downtown, all glass and chrome, the kind of place that screamed money. Every evening, He'd leave at 6 p.m. sharp, climb into his black sedan, and drive to a bar 2 towns over. It was a dive, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I'd sit in my beat-up Honda, parked across the street, watching him meet a man in a gray hoodie. They'd talk for exactly 10 minutes, exchange an envelope, and leave. My gut told me this was connected, but I couldn't get close enough to hear without blowing my cover. One night, I got bold. I slipped into the bar, ordered a soda, and sat in a corner booth, close enough to catch fragments of their conversation. "It's handled," Caldwell said, his voice low but nervous. "Just keep your end quiet." The man in the hoodie nodded, pocketing the envelope. I couldn't see his face, but his build, broad shoulders, cocky swagger, reminded me of Ethan. My hands shook as I snapped a blurry photo with my phone. It wasn't much, but it was something. Back home, I called Sarah, Dad's old lawyer, who was back from maternity leave. She was furious when I told her about the revised will. "Your father never mentioned changing it," she said. "He was meticulous. If he'd wanted to rewrite it, he'd have called me." She agreed to meet me and review the documents. When I showed her the bank transfer, her eyes narrowed. "This is bad, Emily. If Caldwell took a bribe, we can nail him. But we need more." Sarah suggested hiring a private investigator, but I couldn't afford one. So I became my own. I started digging into Caldwell's life, his finances, his habits, his weaknesses. Public records showed he'd bought a new car and a vacation home in the last 3 months, far beyond a small-town executor's salary. Suspicious, but still circumstantial. Then I got a break. A friend from my art gallery, Mia, worked part-time at a tech repair shop. I asked her to check if Caldwell had ever brought in a device. She found a record of him dropping off a laptop for a data recovery job 2 months ago. "He was paranoid about it," Mia said. "Kept saying he needed everything backed up before it was too late." I begged her to get me access to the backup, even if it meant bending a few rules. She hesitated but agreed, slipping me a USB drive with the files a few days later. The laptop data was a goldmine. Emails between Caldwell and Ethan, starting 3 months before Dad's death. Ethan had promised Caldwell $100,000 to forge a new will, with $50,000 paid up front. The emails were careful, coded in vague terms like the project and the adjustment, but it was clear what they meant. My heart pounded as I read one from Ethan. "She'll never figure it out. Just make sure the paperwork looks clean." I wanted to confront them right then, but Sarah warned me to play it smart. "We need something they can't wiggle out of," she said. "A confession, a witness, something airtight." I didn't know how I'd get that, but I was done being the victim. Ethan thought he'd outsmarted me, but he didn't know I was already closing in. The emails were damning, but Sarah was right. They weren't enough to convict. Ethan and Caldwell could claim they were discussing something else, some legitimate business. I needed a confession, something that would hold up in court. But how do you trap 2 men who've already proven they're willing to lie and cheat? I started watching Ethan more closely. He was living large now, driving a new sports car, throwing parties at Dad's house like it was his personal playground. It made my blood boil, but it also gave me an idea. Ethan was cocky, and cocky people make mistakes. If I could get him talking, bragging even, I might catch him slipping. I decided to confront him, but not directly. I called him, pretending I was ready to move on. My voice was shaky, but I played it like I was defeated. "Ethan, I just want to talk. Maybe we can work something out." He took the bait, agreeing to meet me at a coffee shop. I chose a busy one, loud enough to mask a recording device, but quiet enough for clear audio. I bought a small voice recorder, tested it, and tucked it into my jacket pocket. At the coffee shop, Ethan strolled in, all swagger and fake concern. "I'm glad you're being reasonable, Em," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Dad would have wanted us to get along." I swallowed my anger and played along. "I just don't understand why he changed the will. Did you talk to him about it?" He hesitated, then smirked. "Dad was worried about you. Said you were too unstable to handle the money." I just helped him see reason. Liar. I wanted to scream, but I kept my cool. "So you and Caldwell worked it out together?" His eyes flicked to the side, a telltale sign he was nervous. "Caldwell's a professional. He did what was legal." But his voice wavered, and I pressed harder, asking about the bank transfer. He laughed it off, saying it was for consulting fees. but I could see the sweat on his brow. The recorder caught every word. I left the meeting with a mix of hope and frustration. The recording was good, but it wasn't a confession. I needed more. That's when Sarah suggested something risky, a sting. If Ethan's still working with Caldwell, we could catch them in the act, she said. But you'd need to wear a wire. The idea terrified me. I wasn't a spy, just a painter with a grudge. But I was also desperate. Sarah connected me with a detective friend, Officer Daniels, who agreed to help off the books. He fitted me with a tiny wire, barely noticeable under my sweater, and coached me on how to stay calm. The plan was simple. I'd confront Caldwell, push him to admit the bribe, and get it on tape. Ethan would be there, too. I'd make sure of it. I called Caldwell, saying I had proof of the bribe and wanted to settle things quietly. He agreed to meet at his office after hours, and I told Ethan to come, claiming it was about family matters. My stomach churned as I walked into the lion's den, the wire taped against my skin like a ticking bomb. The office was dark except for a single lamp on Caldwell's desk, casting long shadows across the room. He sat there, his tie loosened, looking more like a cornered animal than a lawyer. Ethan stood by the window, arms crossed, his confidence faltering when he saw the fire in my eyes. The wire felt heavy against my chest, a reminder that one wrong word could ruin everything. "Emily, what's this about?" Caldwell asked, his voice tight. "You said you had proof?" I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of courage. "I know about the $50,000 Ethan paid you. I have the bank records, the emails. You forged the will, didn't you?" Caldwell's face paled, but Ethan laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "You're delusional, Em. You've got nothing." Then why's Caldwell sweating? I shot back, stepping closer. "Tell me, Raymond, how much did Ethan promise you to screw me over?" Caldwell's eyes darted to Ethan, who gave a subtle shake of his head. "This is ridiculous," Caldwell said, standing. "I'm not discussing this without my lawyer." But I wasn't backing down. "I'm giving you a chance to come clean. The police are already looking into this. You want to go down with Ethan, or you want a deal?" Ethan lunged forward, his face inches from mine. "You're bluffing. You've always been a loser, Emily. Dad knew it, and so do I." That's when I snapped. "Dad loved me. He trusted me. You're the one who betrayed him." My voice cracked, but I kept going, pouring out years of resentment. "You bribed Caldwell, didn't you? You stole my inheritance because you're too weak to make anything of yourself." Ethan's smirk vanished. "You want to play dirty?" he hissed. "Fine. Yeah, I paid Caldwell. He made the will look legit. You were never going to get that money, Emily. You're a mess." Caldwell groaned, rubbing his temples. "Shut up, Ethan," he muttered, but it was too late. The wire had caught it all. I felt a rush of triumph, but I needed more from Caldwell. I turned to him, softening my voice. "Raymond, you don't have to go down with him. Tell the truth. The police will go easier on you." He hesitated, his eyes flickering with fear. Then, in a whisper, he said, "It was Ethan's idea. He came to me, said he'd make it worth my while. I didn't want to, but I needed the money." I could have collapsed from relief, but I held my ground. "You'll testify to that?" I asked. Before he could answer, Ethan grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "You think you've won? You're nothing, Emily." But his voice shook, and I knew he was scared. I yanked free and walked out, the wire still recording, my heart pounding with victory. Officer Daniels was waiting in a van outside. He listened to the recording, his face grim but satisfied. "This is enough to start building a case," he said. "But we need to be careful. Ethan's slippery." I nodded, knowing this wasn't over. Ethan would fight dirty, and I had to be ready. The next few days were a blur of strategy and fear. Officer Daniels took the recording to the district attorney, who agreed it was strong but not bulletproof. Ethan's confession was clear, but Caldwell's could be dismissed as coerced. We needed something else, something to seal their fate. That's when Daniels dropped a bombshell. Ethan had been wearing a wire of his own. Apparently, Ethan didn't trust Caldwell either. He'd recorded their meetings, likely to blackmail Caldwell if things went south. Daniels had caught wind of it through a tip from the man in the gray hoodie, who turned out to be a lowlife fixer Ethan had hired to handle the dirty work. The fixer, spooked by the police sniffing around, had turned over Ethan's wire recordings to save himself. Daniels played me one of the tapes. Ethan's voice, cold and calculated, laid it all bare. "Caldwell, you get the will done. I'll handle the rest. Emily won't suspect a thing." Hearing it felt like a punch to the gut, but it also lit a fire in me. This was the nail in their coffin. The DA moved fast, issuing warrants for Ethan and Caldwell. I was called to the station to give a formal statement, my hands shaking as I recounted every detail. Sarah sat beside me, her calm presence grounding me. "You did good, Emily," she said. "This is justice for your dad." But Ethan wasn't going down without a fight. He hired a high-priced lawyer, claiming the recordings were doctored, that I'd set him up. He even tried to spin a story that I was the one trying to manipulate the will. It was infuriating, but the DA assured me Ethan's lies wouldn't hold up. The wire he'd worn to trap Caldwell was now trapping him. As the case built, I started piecing my life back together. I went back to my gallery, painting with a fury I hadn't felt in years. Each stroke was for Dad, for the trust he'd placed in me. But I couldn't shake the fear that Ethan would find a way to slither out of this. He'd always been good at that. Then Caldwell cracked. Facing jail time, he agreed to testify against Ethan in exchange for a lighter sentence. His statement corroborated everything. Ethan had approached him, offered the bribe, and orchestrated the fake will. Caldwell even produced a draft of the forged document, complete with Ethan's handwritten notes on how to make it believable. The trial date was set, and I felt a mix of dread and hope. I wanted Ethan to pay, but I also wanted closure, for me, for Dad. The night before the trial, I sat with Dad's letter again, rereading his words. Look closer. I realized he wasn't just talking about the will. He was telling me to see myself, to trust my strength. I wasn't the broken kid Ethan thought I was. I was a fighter, and I was going to win. The prosecutor played the recordings, first mine, then Ethan's. The jury's faces hardened as Ethan's voice filled the room, admitting to the bribe with chilling nonchalance. His lawyer tried to poke holes, claiming entrapment, but the evidence was overwhelming. Caldwell took the stand, his voice trembling as he detailed Ethan's scheme, the late-night meetings, the cash transfers, the forged will. "I was weak," Caldwell said, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Harper. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was pity. He'd been a pawn in Ethan's game, just like me." When it was my turn to testify, I spoke from the heart, telling the jury about Dad, his love, his trust, his dreams for me. I told them how Ethan had twisted that love into a weapon. My voice broke, but I didn't stop. I owed Dad that much. Ethan's defense was a desperate scramble. He took the stand, spinning lies about Dad's wishes and my instability. But the jury wasn't buying it. The wire he'd worn to trap Caldwell was his undoing, its recordings painting a clear picture of his greed. The prosecutor's closing argument was brutal. Ethan Harper didn't just steal an inheritance. He stole a daughter's legacy, a father's trust. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady. Guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. Ethan's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw him as he truly was: small, desperate, broken. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in prison, with restitution to be determined later. Caldwell got 2 years, with parole possible if he cooperated fully. As Ethan was led away in handcuffs, he looked at me, his eyes burning with hate. "This isn't over," he mouthed. But it was. I'd won, not just for me, but for Dad. The courtroom emptied, and I sat there, tears streaming down my face, feeling both empty and whole. Sarah hugged me, whispering, "You did it." The estate was returned to me, Dad's house, his savings, the cabin. But it wasn't about the money. It was about justice, about proving Ethan wrong. I was the daughter Dad believed in, the one he'd trusted to fight. The weeks after the trial were a strange mix of healing and rebuilding. I moved back into Dad's house, the Victorian now feeling like home again. I walked its halls, touching the walls where Dad's laughter still seemed to echo, and I cried for all we'd lost, but also for what I'd reclaimed. The inheritance wasn't just property, it was Dad's love, his belief in me, made tangible. I sold the house, though. Keeping it felt like clinging to a ghost. The money went to paying off debts, expanding my gallery, and setting up a scholarship in Dad's name for young artists like me, kids who needed someone to believe in them. The cabin by Lake Tahoe, though, that I kept. I'd go there on weekends, sketching by the water, feeling Dad's presence in every brushstroke. Ethan's appeals dragged on, but they went nowhere. The evidence was too strong, his lies too thin. I heard he was struggling in prison, his charm useless behind bars. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him, but I couldn't. He'd chosen this path, and I'd chosen mine. Caldwell served his time quietly, sending me a letter of apology that I didn't open. I didn't need his remorse. I needed to move forward. Sarah became a friend, not just a lawyer, checking in on me as I rebuilt my life. Mia, too, was there, helping me hang new paintings in the gallery, celebrating every small victory. One night, I sat at the cabin, Dad's letter in my hands. Look closer. I'd done that. Not just at the will, but at myself. I'd found strength I didn't know I had, courage I'd never needed before. The girl who'd once felt like she'd never be enough had faced down a liar and won. Not because I was perfect, but because I was enough. I painted that night, a canvas of bright colors, blues for the lake, golds for the sunlight, reds for the fire in my heart. It was for Dad, for us, for the legacy Ethan tried to steal. When I finished, I hung it in the gallery, right in the center, where everyone could see. The title was simple, Inheritance. Life wasn't perfect. There were still bills, doubts, lonely nights. But I had something Ethan never would, the truth and the love it carried. I'd fought for it, and I'd won. And in that victory, I found not just my inheritance, but myself.